Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Career Change Champions podcast. I am your host, Tonya Montella, and today I have with me Dakota Warkentin. Dakota is a medical nerd turned full-time real estate investor. In her previous career, she practiced as a physician assistant in both adult and pediatric oncology. After severe burnout in the medical field, she realized she wanted more control over her most important asset, which was her time. Using real estate investing, she has found her passion for entrepreneurship and has realized the power real estate can provide. Through their company, Pinnacle Investments, Dakota and her partner Jeff hold 4 rental units and have completed over $6 million in real estate transactions, which is just incredible. She's also co-founder of Josie and Dakota, which has a goal of helping others realize and use the power of real estate investing through self-directed courses. She is an investor, a coach, an entrepreneur, and leader in the real estate investing community. Welcome, Dakota. We're so happy to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Awesome. So far, my guests have been based out of the US, and that's why I was so excited to have you on as our first guest outside of the US. Can you share with our listeners where you're based out of?
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was your first Canadian guest. That's very exciting. I'm honored. So I live in Ontario, more specifically in Ottawa, which is the capital of the country. A lot of people don't know that. I think a lot of people think it's Toronto, but it's Ottawa. But I'm actually from a much smaller town originally in Northern Ontario. So, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. So I'm so interested in this path that has led you to real estate investment. And I'm curious if you can take me back to your time as a physician assistant. What specifically were you doing and kind of where were you at that point in your life?
Yeah. So I guess when I transitioned into full-time real estate investing, I had been practicing for about 6 years. So I did a total of 6 years of schooling and then practice for 6 years. The first 3, I was doing orthopedic oncology in the adult world. So dealing with like bone and soft tissue cancer. And then for the last 3 years, I was doing pediatric oncology. So dealing with like blood cancer, basically any kind of childhood cancer and benign blood disorders. So that's where I was at when I transitioned. So I was actually a physician assistant for, not an incredible amount of time, but for pretty long. And it was a tough decision to make the transition, but I think in the end, a very necessary one.
Mm-hmm. I'm so curious, what got you interested in that field to begin with?
As a physician assistant?
Yeah.
I was a huge nerd when I was in school. I liked math, I liked sciences, but I really liked biology. And specifically, I just thought the human body was fascinating. So when I graduated high school, I did my undergrad in biology. And again, just realized how much I enjoyed learning about the human body and decided at that point that I was going to go into medicine. And it was a tough decision whether I was going to go to medical school and become a physician or do the physician assistant program. But to me, and I think this is going to probably end up being a bit of a theme, my time meant a lot to me. And I didn't necessarily want a job that was going to take up all of my time. I'd have to be, evenings, weekends, like incredibly long hours. And I decided at that point that the physician assistant program and becoming a physician assistant would be the better route for me. As much as I loved the idea of medicine, I didn't want my job or my career to be my entire life. So that's where I decided to become a physician assistant.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I love that you've kind of observed a theme where your value has really been your time, which is critically important, right? And I love the part where you said you wanted to take more control over that, right? Mm-hmm. So I can only imagine what could cause burnout, what could possibly cause burnout in that industry. But can you share a little bit about kind of, I guess, what made you realize you were burned out?
Oh, it took a long time to realize, I guess, that I was truly burnt out. I knew I wasn't in a good space by the end of it. But it really, I mean, it started purely with being in oncology, working with adult cancers, then working in childhood cancer. That alone is it's a very straining area to be in. Obviously, a lot of emotions. And as someone who had a really hard time, I guess, distancing myself from that emotion, that built up quite a bit over time. So that was something that I didn't really realize until the end. It took about 6 years for that to fully build up. And then obviously COVID hit. So COVID was a big player in it. I mean, the Canadian healthcare sector is a little bit different than the States. But I found that there were some issues in healthcare that were really brought to the surface during COVID. It really kind of shone a light on that. Mm-hmm. And just with the stress of, day to day, not really knowing what was going to happen, there's the stress of your patients. You're already in a very difficult area of practice. And again, it started to snowball. So by the time that I was pretty much ready to quit, it really built up on so many different levels, and COVID being sort of the cherry on top of that. And I ended up taking 3 months of mental health leave to try to sort of correct what had happened. And that mental health leave is where I really realized how much I truly valued my time, because I had so much of it, right? I was really working on myself during that time. But I really realized how important that was to me. And I ended up going back to work and trying to, again, correct what had happened and try to get back into it. Because I loved medicine. That wasn't, what was taking me out of it. I loved my patients, and I hated the idea of leaving that behind. But I went back and realized I wasn't better. And I didn't think that time would really heal that. So that's where I decided that I needed to change things up a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I heard a lot of different things you said there. Number one is what I would call the pivot moment that COVID presented in your life, which I'm hearing a lot, as we all know. It happened to a lot of people. And then the other is you taking time for yourself. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone taking 3 months time for their own mental health. And I just want to commend you for even taking a step to do that, because oftentimes we tend to just keep pushing and it doesn't make anything better. But you took the time to actually, do a lot of self-reflection. I can only imagine what other things you did during that time to really focus on yourself. But I think it's huge. And it sounds like during that time you had a moment of enlightenment, I imagine, with what you wanted to do. I hear you saying you kind of went back and tried again, but were there other realizations you had during that period, just as it relates to your career?
Other realizations. I think the biggest one was the time piece. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want a job or a career that was going to put me in that situation. And obviously there were personal factors that put me there. It's just like the personality that I have. I get very invested things, and I'm not very good at saying no, and not very good at, I guess, quitting. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm someone who puts everything into what I'm doing. So I realized that if I was going to be putting everything into a job and that was going to put me into the position that I was in, I wasn't okay with that. Mm-hmm. I wasn't okay with my mental health taking a hit because of the career that I was in. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the big realizations that I had during that time. I wasn't okay with the position that I was in. And again, partially probably things with my own personality mixed with the career I was in. I felt like that's what got me there. And I wasn't okay with that.
Yeah, no, of course not. Well, and I imagine it must have been really conflicting for you, because I heard you say you're not the type of person to quit and you loved your patients, but at the same time, you realized what it was doing to you personally. So there's that conflict between, you wanting to do your best work and continue on with the career that you had chosen, but also too wanting to make sure that you prioritize yourself and your own happiness. So I can imagine that was a bit of a challenge.
Oh, even taking the 3 months, that took a lot. I probably put off taking the time off by about 6 months, maybe even a year.
Oh my God.
So I knew I needed it, and I kept just trying to push through it. But it was to the point that I couldn't even get myself out the door to go to work. So it almost wasn't a choice. Like it was a choice in the end to take the time off, but it wasn't a choice at the same time. My body just was like, nope, you are done. This isn't happening. So yeah, it was tough. It was very tough.
I can imagine. I'm curious what your process was, if you can recall, and maybe it was just a subconscious thing. I don't know. I'm curious. What was your process in determining what career you wanted to step into next?
So when I quit, my partner and I had actually already been investing in real estate. So we had started about 4 or 5 years, maybe 4 years prior to me quitting my job. And at the time when we were doing it, it was one of those things. We actually started, and it was like, oh, it's going to be like a side gig, right? Like it's going to be another way for us to invest. It's going to be an avenue for us. And then as we got more into it, we really enjoyed it. And we were like, okay, so maybe, 5-10 years down the road, we're going to quit our jobs and we're going to do this full time. And then it went to like 5 years, 3 years, 2 years. And then I went on mental health leave, and I was like, I think it's now, right? Like I'm going to go back. I'm going to see how I do, how long I can last, but I think it's now. So the benefit was that this was already something that it was established, I guess, in a way in our lives. So it wasn't, it was a big transition, I think, for everybody else, but for me, it wasn't. It was something that was already in my life. And I've really always had a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, I guess. I hear from my parents all the time when I was much, much younger, like probably about 5 or 6, I would literally sell everything on the side of the road. Like people have lemonade stands. I'd pick flowers from my mom's garden and sell those. I would like paint rocks and sell those. Like literally, my mom had this like massive amethyst. And I remember one day, like just chipping at it and like selling those amethyst chunks on the side of the road. So like, I was like, got to find a way to make money, So I think that was already deep seated. I just needed to pull it out. So I think all of those elements kind of came together right at the perfect time to allow me to have that transition from healthcare into the real estate investing world.
I love that story so much. My son is 5, and I can just imagine you being around that age doing those things. He actually said to us last night, he said, I want to be on YouTube. And we said,
yes.
Why? What's your reason? Do you want to like get a lot of attention? Like what's the reason? And he said, well, I want to make a lot of money and I want a lot of attention. So
he's an entrepreneur.
I think you're onto something there, but that's adorable. Okay. So in terms of thinking through that decision, right? I'm curious, given your transition from the work that you were doing before, kind of having that aha moment to say, it's not 5 years, it's not 3, it's now, which I love as well. What advice would you give to women who are burned out in their current line of work and that may be in a similar place to where you were at that time?
I think it ends up being a little bit different for everybody. If someone is burnt out, I really think that taking that time off, and it's so hard as someone who is in a career to take that time away. Like I said, I was almost forced to do it because my body basically shut down. But when you know that you need it, take it and be okay with that. When I was on mental health leave, I didn't tell anybody. I was off. So my partner knew, obviously, because I was home every day, but his parents didn't know. His parents live in Ottawa. So we were seeing them every other weekend. And I always had like a reason that I wasn't going to work. Like it was like, oh, I don't know, I have an appointment tomorrow, so I took the day off, or I'm on vacation. And I was almost like, I don't want to say ashamed, but I didn't want to tell people that that was the situation that I was in. And I think back on that and I'm like, why was I so ashamed to tell people that I was on a mental health leave? Because I was taking care of myself. And I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people are in that same situation where they know they need that time, but they're afraid to take it. So having that time to look back on that and realize how vital that was for me, I think if you're in that position, take that time, because it's so important. And then reflect, right? Like I took that time, I reflected on my job, I decided what I was okay with, what I was not okay with. And I think for some people, if they're able to take that time off and they get back into their career, I think they can still have a long career. It's just setting boundaries when they get back, right? So I don't think it necessarily means, you're burnt out, time for a career switch. But I think taking that time to really reflect on what got you to that burnout. Is there something that you can change to prevent that in the future? Or maybe it's either getting a new job in the same field or totally switching gears. So I think it's person dependent, but I think the biggest thing is taking that time for yourself and making sure that you use that time to reflect and figure out what's going to help you not get into that situation again.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you kind of said it there. It's a mindset shift. I think there's such a negative connotation when we think of mental health. You think of like, oh, something's wrong, or you need help, or medication, or therapy, or I'm crazy. These sorts of terms come up in people's mind when you say that phrase. But you said it as I was taking care of myself. And that's a completely different way to think about it, which is exactly what you were doing. And maybe if you had that, realization that that's truly what you were doing, maybe you would have felt a little more comfortable sharing it. But yeah, I think that that's exactly the way to look at it, is you're taking care of yourself, and it's so important. I think too, when you talk about taking the time, I couldn't agree more. Whether it's 3 months, I think 3 months is incredible for those that feel like, oh, I could never do 3 months. That's so long. How could I ever? I always say, just take those moments to check in with yourself throughout, randomly throughout your life. Just take a moment to pause, which we don't often do, right? Again, we're in that rat race, and we're just living life and not really thinking twice about what's happening around us, but taking that moment to pause and think, what's going on here? How am I feeling about it? Can I change it? What else needs to be done? And taking a more active role in our lives versus just kind of living passively, right?
Yeah. And I think it doesn't need to get to a point of burnout to do that, right? Like if you're starting to feel a little bit fatigued and, you kind of get that like rumbling at the beginning, like, oh, something feels a little bit off.
Yeah.
Which is one of the mistakes I made because I let it get past that point. But you can check in with yourself before that happens and say like, okay, something feels a little bit off. What is it? What do I need to change? Maybe it's just taking an afternoon and going to like, I don't know, I like getting my nails done, right? So you go and you like, they're not done right now, unfortunately, but I like to go and like get my nails done. And that's like soothing for me. Or you like take a weekend and just like get away. And that doesn't mean like taking a big trip, just like, going to a cottage or something like that. And I think you can take those little times for yourself and sort of prevent a bigger burnout in the future.
Yeah.
So don't wait for yourself to get burnt out to do this like self-reflection and check in with yourself before you get to that point, I think is a big thing, which is something I learned during that because I let it get way too far.
Yeah. And career aside, like treat yourself, right? Like burnout aside, just do it. Like we are worth it. And it's so nice to just take that moment. We talked about taking that time to pause and reflect on what's happening in our lives and our careers, but also just take that time to give yourself a little bit of love. Why not? Right?
Yeah, it's so important. You definitely don't need to get yourself into a bad position before you start doing these kinds of things.
Yeah. So I'm curious now with where you are and having those aha moments that led you to real estate investment and knowing that your time was really very precious to you and kind of leaning in fully and realizing now is the time. I'm curious if you can kind of share, where you're at in terms of your happiness and your level of fulfillment in what you're doing today.
Oh man. So it's actually, it hasn't been that long. I left my job in December. So it's only been a couple of months since I've been fully like a full-time real estate investor. But even other people are like, they look at my social media or they see me, I guess, in person now that COVID's a little bit better. But they're just like, you're glowing. Like you just look so much happier. Like we can tell. Like my mom, like every time I call her, she's like, you look so happy. You look so happy.
Oh.
So it's been a big difference. It was so hard because I did like medicine and people are like, oh, like what was wrong with it? What was wrong with it? I did like it, but I'm doing a lot better now that I'm doing my own thing. I'm an entrepreneur. And I think the big thing is being able to decide what I get to do with my time. Like, obviously we're like, my partner and I are super busy. We have a lot of meetings, a lot of stuff going on, but I get to decide that. Like, I get to decide how busy I am. Obviously I have to be busy to a point because I have to like put food on the table. I have to eat, but I get to decide. Like, I think there was a Friday 2 or so weeks ago, and it was a nice day, and we didn't have very many meetings, I think, that day. So we did like our meetings in the morning and we just did nothing for the rest of the day. So we were tired. We had done a lot of work that week and we were like, you know what, we can work Sunday if we want. But today was the day that we were like, no, it's a Friday. We're relaxing today.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to kind of decide when we get to work and arrange our schedules the way that we want them to be has been life-changing, really. And like I said, it's not to say we're not busy. We're definitely very busy, but I get to be busy on my own terms now. Mm-hmm. And that's the part of it that I like.
I love that. Well, congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So if people are interested in real estate investment or just to follow you and watch how glowing you are on social media and such, how can they follow you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we actually just rebranded. So you'll get to see the new branding on our social media. So our company is Opinacon Investments. So we are on Instagram and we are on Facebook. So give us a follow, and you never really know who you're talking to. It's either going to be me or my partner, Jeff. So it's always a surprise, but definitely reach out to us on there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. So like personally. So if you want to reach out to me personally and know which one of us you're talking to, you can also do that. So I'm Dakota Warkentin on Facebook and on Instagram. So make sure you reach out to us.
Yes, absolutely. Dakota, thank you so much for being here. This is great.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much for the talk.